Chapter 9, Waiting for David. This is a joke, right? Shay didn't answer. They were back in the heart of the ruins, in the shadow of the tallest building around. She was staring up at it with a puzzled expression on her face. I think I remember how to do this, she said. Do what? Get up there. Yeah, here it is. Shay eased her board forward, ducking to pass through a gap in the crumbling wall. Shay? Don't worry, I've done this before. I think I already had my initiation for tonight, Shay. Tally wasn't in the mood for another one of Shay's jokes. She was tired and it was a long way back to town, and she had cleanup duty tomorrow at her dorm. Just because it was summer didn't mean she could sleep all day. But Tally followed Shay through the gap, arguing would probably take longer. They rose straight into the air, the boards using the metal skeleton of the building to climb. It was creepy being inside, looking out of the empty windows at the ragged shapes of other buildings, like being a rusty ghost watching as its city crumbled over the centuries. The roof was missing, and they emerged to a spectacular view. The clouds had all disappeared, and moonlight brought the ruins into sharp relief, the buildings like rows of broken teeth. Tally saw that it really had been the ocean she'd glimpsed from the roller coaster. From up here, the water shone like a pale band of silver in the moonlight. Shay pulled something from her shoulder pack and tore it in half. The world burst into flame. Oh, blind me, why don't you? Tally cried, covering her eyes. Oh yeah, sorry. Shay held the safety sparkler at arm's length. It crackled to full strength in the silence of the ruins, casting flickering shadows through the interior of the ruin. Shay's face looked monstrous in the glare, and sparks floated downward to be lost in the depths of the wrecked building. Finally, the sparkler ran out. Tally blinked, trying to clear the spots from before her eyes. Her night vision ruined, she could hardly see anything except the moon in the sky. She swallowed, realizing that the sparkler would have been seen from anywhere in the valley, maybe even out to sea. Shay, was that a signal? Yeah, it was. Tally looked down. The dark buildings below were filled with phantom flickers of light. Echoes of the sparkler burned into her eyes. Suddenly very aware of how blind she was, Tally felt a drop of cold sweat creep down her spine. Who are we meeting anyway? His name's David. David? That's a weird name. It sounded made up to Tally. She decided again that this was all a joke. So he's just going to show up here? This guy doesn't really live in the ruins, does he? No, he lives pretty far away, but he might be close by. He comes here sometimes. You mean he's from another city? Shay looked at her, but Tally couldn't read her expression in the darkness. Something like that. Shay returned her gaze to the horizon as if looking for a signal to answer in her own. Tally wrapped herself in her jacket, standing still. She began to realize how cold it had become. She wondered how late it was. Without her interface ring, she couldn't just ask. The almost full moon was descending in the sky, so it had to be past midnight. Tally remembered from astronomy. That was one thing about being outside the city. It made all that nature stuff they taught in school seem a lot more useful. She remembered now how rainwater fell on the mountains and soaked into the ground before bubbling up full of minerals. Then it made its way back to the sea, cutting rivers and canyons into the earth over the centuries. If you lived out here, you could ride your hoverboard along the rivers like in the really old days before the Rusties, when the not as crazy pre-Rusties traveled around in small boats made from trees. Her night vision gradually returned and she scanned the horizon. Would there really be another flare out there, answering Shay's? Tally hoped not. She'd never met anyone from another city. She knew from school that in some cities they spoke other languages or didn't turn pretty until they were 18 and other weird stuff like that. Shay, maybe we should head home. Let's wait a while longer. Tally bit her lip. Look, maybe this David isn't around tonight. Yeah, maybe, probably, but I was hoping he'd be here. She turned to face Tally. It would be really cool if you met him. He's different. Sounds like it. I'm not making this up, you know. Hey, I believe you, Tally said, although with Shay, she was never totally sure. Shay turned back to the horizon, chewing on a fingernail. Okay, I guess he's not around. We can go if you want. It's just that it's really late and a long way back, and I've got cleanup tomorrow. Shay nodded. Me too. Thanks for showing me all this, Shay. It was all really incredible, but I think one more cool thing would kill me. Shay laughed. The roller coaster didn't kill you? The roller coaster didn't kill you? Just about. Forgive me for that yet? I'll let you know, Skinny. Shay laughed. Okay, but remember not to tell anyone about David. Hey, I promised. You can trust me, Shay. Really. All right, I do trust you, Tally. She bent her knees and her board started to descend. Tally took one last look around. taking in the ruins splayed out below them, the dark woods, the pearly strip of river stretching toward the glowing sea. She wondered if there was anyone out there really, or if David was just some story that Uglies made up to scare one another. But Shay didn't seem scared. She seemed genuinely disappointed that no one had answered her signal, as if meeting David would have been even better than showing off the rapids, the ruins, and the roller coaster. Whether he was real or not, Tally thought David was very real to Shay. They left through the gap in the wall and flew to the outskirts of the ruins, then followed the vein of iron up out of the valley. At the ridge, the board started to stutter, and they stepped off. Tired as Tally was, carrying the board didn't seem so impossible this time. She had stopped thinking of it as a toy, like a little balloon. The hoverboard had become something more solid, something that obeyed its own rules, and could be dangerous too. Tally figured that Shay was right about one thing. Being in the city all the time made everything fake in a way, like the buildings and bridges held up by hover struts or jumping off a rooftop with a bungee jacket on. Nothing was quite real there. She was glad Shay had taken her out to the ruins. If nothing else, the mess left by the Rusties proved that things could go terribly wrong if you weren't careful. Close to the river, the boards lighted up, and the two of them jumped on gratefully. Shay groaned as they got their footing. I don't know about you, but I'm not taking another step tonight. That's for sure. Shay leaned forward and eased her board out into the river, wrapping her dorm jacket around her shoulders against the spray of the rapids. Tally turned to take one last look back. With the clouds gone, she could just see the ruins from here. She blinked. There seemed to be the barest flicker coming from over where the roller coaster had been. Maybe it was just a trick of the light, a reflection of the moonlight from some exposed piece of unrusted metal. Shay, she said softly. You coming or what? Shay shouted over the roar of the river. Tally blinked again, but couldn't make out the flicker anymore. In any case, they were too far away. Mentioning it to Shay would only make her anxious to go back. There was no way Tally was making the hike again, and it probably was nothing. Tally took a deep breath and shouted, Come on, Skinny! Race you! She urged her board onto the river, cutting into the cold spray, and for a moment leaving a laughing Shay behind.